Good morning and welcome to Identity Leathercraft. This session we're going to look at inlaying into leather. So you might want to inlay a stone, a beaded strip, a piece of woven strip. It could be some carving that you've done that you want to inset. So it's kind of insetting, inlaying. So as an example, you can see there's anthracite stones being set into the leather there. And you might also have seen taxidermy eyes, that kind of thing, done for books. So yeah, just to give you an idea of how to have a bit of fun and play around with inlays. We do sell, which you might not have seen on the website, but we have 6 different designs in these beautiful beaded strips. These are inspired by Native American designs and based around the different elements. So this one is called water. When you're using these beaded strips and you're cutting them up, you get quite a good length with this one, but if you wanted to use different sections of it, I would wrap some masking tape around it and then cut through that middle bit. And what you want to do when you're cutting through beads with your scissors is just to allow the scissors to kind of just slowly do their work, so they kind of cut through where they can feel. They will kind of slide between the beads, and then you should be able to slowly go through without cutting the beads and without damaging the scissors. So work out your length that you want to cut. You're going to want to allow, I usually allow 10 millimeters either end of my beaded strips. I'm going to divide the session today into 2 halves, so I'm going to talk first on inlaying the beaded strips, which are like a flat, regular shape, and then the second half will be about irregular shapes. So this is a piece of broken necklace I'm actually using for this inlay, which is a piece of it that's been put here. Generally with this method we talk belt and braces, so it's going to have a backing lining which will hold the inlay in place, and a stitch around which will hold everything tight and in together. So when you're doing your inlay, you want to, as I say, have a extra piece either end which I've taped over so that the beads don't come. What I have actually, since I've cut it before, I peeled the tape back and I flicked off any loose beads and then just stuck the tape back over. So I'm going to lay this down on my piece of leather. Just take this piece of masking tape off. I lay this down on my piece of leather and I'm going to use just my awl, and I'm going to just measure either side and put a little dot top and bottom of where I want that to go, and I'm going to work out my measurements so that it's nice and centered into my, I'm doing this on a strip for a keyring. So then with my straight angled ruler I'm going to draw and score down my window, so, and work that out. And if you take quite a deep score at this point, it will give you a good recess for your knife to cut out. And so carefully cut the window out. So as I say, when you were working this out, you need to be thinking to allow the extra from the back. It's also an idea to think about the thickness of the leather and the beads so that you're thinking about things sitting slightly in. One of the reasons for doing this with beads or strips or things like belts is it just helps to reduce the amount of friction that the beads will take when they're kind of being pulled through belt loops and things. So I've cut out my window, and really at this point as well you want to be doing all your dyeing, finishing, edging, and I would put your groove and your stitch holes in this top section. So everything else is all kind of all ready and done at this point. Then when you lay down your strip, particularly if you've got something with a pattern or a piece of tooling, make sure you've got it centered. So you could use a piece of masking tape to make it hold in position. But you'll see on here that this is kind of bending a bit because I've got beads still on this end that are not sitting flush here. So what I need to do is take out my centimetre here, my 10 mil, take out a section of this thick leather so that the beads will sit flatter down. So to do that, I will strop my knife, but this one's been stropped and it's got a new sharp blade, but strop your knife, get a nice sharp blade, and skive out, pare back, work away from you so you don't cut yourself. Just keep shaving, if you like, or paring the leather away. You can probably hear that going. This makes a bit of dust. So just keep going until when you put your fingers on it, you can feel there's a definite thinness there. And if you pick up your beaded piece and keep going until you get to the point where the beads are sitting into that recess nice and tightly, and when you run your fingers over this end, you're not feeling too big a lump from where the beads are. Now I tend to prefer to do this method. The other method you could do is carefully unpick all the beads until you just get back to the tape that the beads come on, which most beads have, and then just go for it. But one of the things that worries me a little bit about doing that is that the starting point of your beads then becomes here, and if they're not caught down completely, if you've cut through any threads by accident, then you're starting to have loose threads in your inlay. So that's why I like to take the beads but recess them. Once that's done, I'm going to hold that in place with a piece of masking tape, just so that I know that it's not going to move anywhere. It also means I can see and check my position and that everything is working flush before I go on. And for this next section, I would then glue my backing on. For your backing, you could do a coloured piece of suede or nappa leather, which would give it a really tactile, soft back. Depending, usually when I've done things with beads that are a little bit raised, I'll use something slightly thicker. So something like this veg tan calf piece, or the 0.8 or 1 mil kipside calf off the website, particularly if you wanted to stick to vegetable tanned leather. So you would then go through the methods which are on my lining leathers section. To cut that, I'd cut it slightly bigger, glue it down in place, and once that's done and glued, you can then use your diamond stitch awl to go through those existing stitch holes that you pre-made and go through to the underside, and then you can sew down in place, and that will give you your inset window neatly finished, and your piece of embellishment in place. So as I say, that's something, a method that you would use, I call that the window method, that you'd use for any kind of regular shaped item. However, sometimes we are deciding to set an eye or a stone or something that's an odd shape. So here I have a bead that I really love. This is from a 1970s necklace from South America that my mum had, and it broke, and I just love these beads and I try to use them for really special things. So it's a beetle scarab, but you can see it's quite chunky, and I want to make this as my inlay method. So what I've done here is I've dampened this piece of leather. So I've gone through the same method, but when I've gone to cut my window, I've gone about 2 or 3 mil inside the line. So I've put this down on the leather, I've drawn round it with the awl in much the same way that you did the other one, but rather than using that awl line, I've gone much lighter, and then I've gone inside of that to create this oval shape, which, as you can see from the piece that's cut out, is a lot smaller than the piece there. And then because I have this light score line, when I dampen the leather, I can push, especially I would probably use veg tan for this, although you can still do it with the chrome. If you're doing it with the chrome, dampen the leather from the back so that the flesh side, so that water moisture content gets in. But it works really well with veg to sort of, the veg will kind of shrink back a little bit, giving you a nice tight fit. So you want to sort of wet the leather enough that you can lift up and mould. You're going to create what I call an eyelid version for this, so that when you put it over the item, and if you've got the leather being damp, you can push and manipulate until you get it sitting how you want to sit. And you want to get it so that you've got it held tightly in place, but with getting flat onto the back. So at this point I would use my bone folder with the wet leather, keep pressing the leather down and around the item, so you're pushing that lid up against it and trying to get the leather to hold in place, but also to get then to be a flat base underneath. So generally as well, again, I would, before I go any further, if I've got any dyeing or anything else I want to do, I would do that at this point so that I can make sure that the dye is covering all these edges. If you need to neaten any of these edges off as well while they're wet, or with gum tragacanth you can do your edge neatening. So see what's showing and see what needs doing, and then you go to that point before you go any further. And then once you've done that, you want to really think about your stitch holes. Now you've got a circle, so you can't really use a chisel, you're going to have to be using it all. So what I tend to do is I tend to do it by eye. This is a very uneven shape, so what I've done is where the leather I know is going to lie flat, it's about another 2 or 3 millimeters out. In this case, this is quite a thick item, from that original light score line that I did, that's where the lip is starting. And starting at the top, I'm putting a hole in, and then I'm just going to go round every 4 or 5 mil by eye and just make a mark to make my holes. And as I get round to this side, I'm just going to slightly make sure that they will all follow round and look right with millimeters. And once I've done that, I'm then ready to glue this back in place onto my backing. So again, you could use a thinner piece of vegetable tanned leather for your lining. Generally for linings, I think it's nice to have something that's quite tactile. So calf leather is very smooth and soft. Kipside calf is really tactile, and again, these leathers give you a contrast colour for the back. So anything, depends what you're doing and how you want your colours to go. You'll see on the lining method I do discuss how to work out your edges when you're doing any lining. It could be that this is part of a bigger project, and it might be that you choose to just make a backing to hold this item in place and not line the whole thing. So you'll see in this example that there's just a circle cut out that's actually creating that sort of pocket, if you like, with the anthracite inside. So work out your lining, glue that down in place, and then this is where your diamond stitching awl again comes in handy. Going through those marks that you made before, pressing straight down, make sure you're not angled, and make sure you don't turn the angle of the awl. Just go through and mark out, pressing down into your 2 pieces of leather. So again, once they're glued together, it's a bit easier. And from that point, you can then stitch around using a saddle stitch or a back stitch, and stitch your item in place, and there you will have an inlay. So what you could do with something like that is to cut that around and make that a locket or a way of fastening. It could be on the front of a book journal, a bag, it could be on all sorts of different things, so completely up to your creativity. I look forward to seeing what you might come up with it, but I hope that's helped you think about how to inlay. You can get all of the glues and things from our website, www.identityleathercraft, and the glues we use today, I would use for this would be the Feebings Leathercraft cement or the Leather Weld, or you could also use, if you've got a very heavy or particularly difficult item, you could use the contact cement, EcoFlow water-based contact cement, which is all on the website as well. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye for now.